When a former weapons inspector calls your naval blockade a joke, and when your regime change operation strengthens the very government you tried to topple, you know something has gone catastrophically wrong. The strategy that was supposed to deliver a quick victory has instead exposed the deepest vulnerabilities in American power projection. Right now, we're witnessing one of the most spectacular strategic collapses in recent American military history. The naval blockade that was announced with such confidence is being questioned not just by critics, but by seasoned military analysts who understand naval warfare. The fundamental problem is simple. You cannot effectively blockade one of the world's most strategic waterways when you lack the ships, when your vessels are vulnerable to advanced missile defenses, and when major powers like China are openly challenging your presence. The reality on the ground tells a very different story from what's being sold to the public. Iran hasn't just survived the initial assault, it has turned the tables completely. While the operation was marketed as a regime change mission that would inspire millions to rise up, what actually happened was the opposite. Millions did take to the streets, but they were mourning their assassinated leader, not celebrating liberation. This is where political calculations meet battlefield realities. The entire operation was built on a fundamentally flawed assumption that killing top leadership would cause the Iranian state to collapse. But institutions don't work that way. Iran's political and military structures have depth. They were designed to survive exactly this kind of decapitation strike. The strategic miscalculation runs even deeper. Tehran was negotiating in good faith on its nuclear program through diplomatic channels. Those negotiations were used as cover for a surprise attack. This isn't just a tactical decision. It's a complete destruction of American credibility on the world stage. When Russia and China watch the United States negotiate while preparing for war, what message does that send about future diplomatic efforts? Now let's talk about who benefits from this disaster. It's certainly not the American people who are watching gas prices spike. It's not the military personnel being sent into an unwinnable situation. The beneficiaries are those who wanted this conflict regardless of the cost. Those who pushed the narrative that regime change would be quick and easy. The economic impact is already catastrophic. Oil prices have shot past $100 per barrel. The Strait of Hormuz, which carries 20% of the world's oil, has become a contested war zone. Global supply chains are fracturing. This isn't just an American problem anymore. It's a crisis that's rippling through every economy on Earth. Here's what the media narrative won't tell you. Iran is winning the decision-making cycle. In military terms, there's something called the OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. The side that controls this cycle wins. Right now, the United States is reacting while Iran is acting. American forces are scrambling to respond to Iranian moves instead of the other way around. The blockade itself reveals the desperation. When peace talks collapsed in Pakistan after 21 hours of negotiations, the immediate response wasn't renewed diplomacy. It was an announcement of economic warfare through naval interdiction. But here's the problem. Enforcing a blockade requires resources America doesn't have in theater. It requires stopping ships from China, India, and Pakistan, countries that have deals with Tehran. Think about what this means strategically. The United States is now on a potential collision course with multiple major powers, all because of a blockade that military experts are calling tactically suicidal. American vessels operating close to Iranian waters are sitting targets for advanced missile systems. Iran has demonstrated it can strike anywhere in the region with precision. The regime change objective has backfired so completely that it's almost hard to comprehend. Instead of bringing moderates to power, the assassination campaign has empowered hardliners. The new Iranian leadership is more militant, more uncompromising, and more committed to resistance than their predecessors. This is the opposite of what was intended. There's also the question of munitions. Military analysts are estimating that at the current rate of expenditure, American stockpiles could be depleted within weeks. You cannot sustain a prolonged conflict when you're running out of ammunition. Iran just has to survive long enough for those stockpiles to run dry, and the advantage shifts completely. The political calculations behind this operation are now completely exposed. There were warnings from within the administration itself. Intelligence assessments called the regime change scenario farcical. Military leaders advised against the operation, but the decision was made anyway, based not on sound strategic analysis, but on political pressure and wishful thinking. This brings us to the deeper question of accountability. When operations fail this badly, when intelligence is ignored, when the outcome is the exact opposite of what was promised, who takes responsibility? The answer appears to be nobody. Instead, we're seeing attempts to redefine what the objectives were in the first place. claims that regime change was never really the goal. But the record is clear. The public statements, the calls for the Iranian people to rise up, the explicit targeting of leadership, all of this pointed to one objective: removing the government in Tehran. That objective has failed, and now we're left with an open-ended conflict, economic chaos, and a diplomatic credibility crisis. The comparison to other failed regime change operations is unavoidable. History has shown us repeatedly that you cannot bomb a population into overthrowing their government. If anything, external attacks create a rally around the flag effect. People who might have opposed their government will defend it when it's under foreign attack. Iran's strategy has been remarkably effective. By controlling the Strait of Hormuz, they've turned a geographic choke point into a geopolitical weapon. They're not just defending their territory, they're dictating the terms of engagement. The toll system they've implemented isn't just about revenue. It's about demonstrating sovereignty over one of the world's most critical waterways. The naval blockade is supposed to counter this, but it's built on a contradiction. How do you blockade a country that's already blocking the very strait you need to operate in? How do you enforce freedom of navigation when your own ships are at risk every time they enter contested waters? These aren't just tactical questions, they're strategic impossibilities. What happens next depends entirely on whether reality is finally acknowledged. The current trajectory leads to escalation, more strikes, more retaliation, more economic damage, more global instability. But there's no military solution that delivers the original objectives. The regime in Tehran isn't going to fall because of airstrikes. The Iranian people aren't going to overthrow their government because foreign powers tell them to. The alternative is negotiation, but that requires credibility that has now been destroyed. When you use diplomatic talks as cover for a surprise attack, you eliminate trust. When Russia and China see this pattern, they draw conclusions about American reliability. This has implications far beyond Iran. It affects every future diplomatic engagement. There's also the domestic political dimension. This conflict was supposed to be a quick win, a demonstration of strength and resolve. Instead, it's turning into a quagmire that's draining resources, damaging alliances, and exposing limitations. The political costs are mounting, and they'll be paid not by those who made the decision, but by those who have to live with the consequences. The fundamental lesson here is about the limits of military power. You can destroy infrastructure, you can kill leaders, you can blockade ports, but you cannot force political outcomes through military action alone. History has taught this lesson repeatedly, yet it keeps being ignored. Iran's retaliatory strikes have demonstrated their capability to hit targets across the region. Gulf states, American bases, allied nations, all have been subjected to precision attacks. This isn't just military posturing. It's a demonstration that Iran has the means to make this conflict extremely costly for everyone involved. The economic warfare component is equally significant. By controlling access to the strait and implementing a toll system, Iran has created a situation where the global economy is being held hostage. The response, a blockade that further restricts shipping, only makes the economic crisis worse. It's a self-defeating strategy that hurts everyone except those who profit from high oil prices. Military experts who understand naval operations are looking at this blockade and seeing fundamental problems. The number of ships required, the vulnerability to shore-based missiles, the impossibility of stopping trade from major powers. All of this adds up to a strategy that exists more in rhetoric than in reality. This is where we see the gap between political messaging and operational capability. Announcing a blockade sounds strong and decisive. Actually enforcing it against a determined adversary with advanced weapon systems in contested waters is something else entirely. The announcement was meant to project power, but the execution reveals limitations. The broader geopolitical implications are staggering. China and Russia are watching closely. They're seeing how the United States operates, how it negotiates, how it fights. Every lesson they learn here will be applied to future conflicts. The precedent being set is that American diplomatic engagement cannot be trusted, and that's a precedent with consequences that will last for decades. There's also the question of what victory even looks like at this point. The original objectives, regime change and nuclear disarmament, are further away now than when the operation started. The Iranian nuclear program is still advancing, the regime is more hardline, and the strategic position is worse. So what's the endgame? What's the plan for actually achieving stated goals? The answer seems to be that there isn't one. The strategy has devolved into reactive measures, blockades announced after talks fail, threats of strikes when blockades don't work, constant escalation without a clear objective or exit strategy. This is how conflicts spiral out of control. Iran has demonstrated something crucial through all of this. They can absorb punishment and keep functioning. Their command structure didn't collapse when leadership was killed. Their military didn't surrender when bases were struck. Their economy, already under sanctions for years, adapted to further pressure. This resilience wasn't accounted for in the planning. The failure to understand your adversary is perhaps the greatest strategic error. Iran was treated as if it would behave like other countries that faced similar pressure. But Iran has spent decades preparing for exactly this scenario. Their entire defense doctrine is built around asymmetric warfare and strategic patience. Now we're seeing that doctrine in action. Iranian forces don't need to defeat the American military in conventional terms. They just need to make the conflict unsustainable, economically, politically, and militarily. And they're succeeding. Every day this continues, the costs mount while the objectives remain unreachable. The role of intelligence in this disaster cannot be overlooked. Intelligence agencies reportedly assessed the regime change scenario as unrealistic. They warned that the Iranian state had institutional depth and resilience. These assessments were ignored in favor of more optimistic projections that aligned with political desires rather than battlefield realities. This is a pattern we've seen before. Intelligence that contradicts preferred narratives gets dismissed. Optimistic scenarios get embraced regardless of their basis in fact. The result is decisions made on fantasy rather than analysis, and when reality intrudes, it does so catastrophically. The peace talks that collapsed in Pakistan reveal another dimension of this crisis. After 21 hours of negotiation, no agreement could be reached. Iranian demands for control of the strait, for compensation, for a regional ceasefire, these weren't just starting positions. They were statements of strength from a country that knows it's winning. The American position, demanding that Iran give up enriched uranium and open the strait unconditionally, these were demands that only make sense if you're winning. But the United States isn't winning. The blockade is more theoretical than real. The military campaign hasn't achieved its objectives. The negotiating position doesn't match the position on the ground. This disconnect between perception and reality is at the heart of the current crisis. There's what's being said publicly, and there's what's actually happening. The public messaging is about strength and resolve and unwavering commitment. The reality is a failing strategy, mounting costs, and no clear path forward. Leadership in moments like this requires the ability to acknowledge when strategies aren't working. It requires the wisdom to change course before disasters become catastrophes. It requires putting the national interest above political considerations and personal pride. What we're seeing instead is doubling down, more blockades, more threats, more escalation in pursuit of objectives that are slipping further from reach with each passing day. I am a journalist, and this is my independent analysis. This is just my point of view that I'm presenting. It may be wrong, but it is my own perspective. I want you to share your point of view in the comments as well.